Washington flips a big-time tackle.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're coming at you with a special bonus episode on this Tuesday morning. We wanted to record this one last night, a little bit before John Mills did officially announce his flip to Washington, but some other things got in the way. So appreciate you sticking with us on this Tuesday by making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Lars, we got a lot of fun stuff we're going to talk about on this bonus show. Talk about a strong ending to Jedd's first class at Washington. What else might be involved with that? But we need to talk about this flip, because obviously the Zach Staskowski news sucked. We talked about that the other night. But if you're looking for consolation prizes, which is obviously not the biggest thing, not what you want, John Mills is somebody who Washington was really high on from the start. And you and I knew this. We saw him on the sideline at spring practice. I remember we were sitting there with our buddy Alex Katz in front of the program. And one thing he said to us was he was standing like around Marcus Bryant that same weekend. He took his official visit up here. And you're like, if you didn't know which one was which, you'd be like, is John Mills the guy that's ready to play right now? Like, is that the transfer?
Yeah, I mean, it reminded me a lot of Justin Hilkema, just in terms of the size, like the sheer stature. Like that's, and when we talked about, you mentioned, the down year on lineman for the West Coast. This is kind of a perfect example of a guy who arguably could be a 4, but is listed as a 3. And it's one of those situations where you don't worry about the ranking. You just worry about the size, the build, the fit, and the fact that we've been talking about him for months and months and months until he committed to Texas. And it's like, all right, okay, then you move on, you kind of come back to it. But that's why those early relationships are so important.
Right. So 2 other things I want to make sure we get in there. One is the athleticism. For his size, he's got really, really nice movement skills. I know he's put on a little bit of extra weight this year. That might have been something Texas had asked him to do. I'm not completely sure. Where I know On 3 had him listed at 345 pounds, where I know 247's got him at 320 right now. So that's an interesting thing there. But on top of that, one thing that I think you and I, we made sure that we covered this in depth over the summer, was we know how critical that May 31st visit weekend was, where it's one of those things where obviously Jedd and his coaching staff, A, aren't able to say that, but B, I don't think they would, but everybody who visited that weekend felt like a priority 1 target. Where you look at some of the guys that came in that weekend, where obviously, Zadris Randy-Sale came in at the end of the month, Jonathan Epperson, some of the other guys, but some of these priority 1 targets where they might have not felt like they were in the best standing in terms of they didn't feel like they were the leaders for those guys. So you bring in Dash Beerley, Jake Flores, say, hey, we want you to recruit Andrew Marsh. Dylan Robinson was one of the guys that came in that weekend. We want you to recruit some of these other high-level talents. You talk about Chase Sims, Smith Orogbo, other guys that they really wanted to make sure they got in on the same weekend. John Mills was one of those guys where they wanted to make sure that, hey, we get you in early. We want to make sure that we can make an impression on you. And obviously it didn't work out at the start, but you come back around to him and you're able to get him right before signing day.
Yeah, it was kind of always interesting where it seemed like he was really interested in Washington early on. I know he wasn't, maybe they weren't the leader, but I could have sworn it seemed like they were like right up there. And then he commits to Texas, and it's like, right, okay, what are you going to do in certain sense, because now Texas in the SEC, you got the big money down there. But this one really kind of almost validates what Brennan and Jedd would be selling, which is, playing time next year, potentially development. And you look at keeping guys on the West Coast. That's a huge selling point, where you got a kid from California. Now, yes, would you like to get, some linemen from Alabama, from Georgia? Yeah, of course. Yeah, no doubt. But
right.
In reality, the odds of getting those and sticking, and the investment that it takes to, make those recruiting trips and all that, when you got California right there, and a kid who easily, I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting within 2 years, fair to say, because when you look at the rotation, he can start at right, move out to left after a while. There's so many different ways to go about this, but that's why getting the character and the profile of the player is what matters more than when you get it. But I do think this kind of speaks to the importance of you never stop recruiting, one, and two, don't freak out if you lose one, because it's just like the portal. The portal give it, the portal take it away. The class, Oregon take it away. Well, we go raid Texas.
Right. That's what we're going to get into after the break. This is why we trust this coaching staff on the recruiting trail, which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at Better Together. Hey, the team you drafted in season-long fantasy but want to stay in the action? Introducing Better Together, the first cooperative daily fantasy platform where teamwork triumphs talent, and you can play with your friends, not against them. Pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner to boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. So grab a friend and join the social daily fantasy movement at Better Together. Better Together is the first cooperative daily fantasy application. Better Together provides a sense of camaraderie and enhances the social experiences of watching sports. It makes you realize that DFS is fun alone, but like a lot of other things, it's better with friends. And it also is a way to stay connected with friends when you can't watch sports together in person. Download Better Together now from the App Store and sign up using promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to play in a contest with or against us, because winning alone is fun, but it's better together. Lars, as we know the everydayers want to talk about, we're going to get into some Donovan Olugbode conversations a little bit later on in the show, because that would be a really strong ending to this class. But looking at what John Mills is in terms of the flip, in terms of the stature, where this isn't like, obviously everybody's just going to look and say, oh, 3-star. This is a guy who's really rose in the ranks over the course of his senior season. And this is a guy who, again, like we said a little bit earlier on, was somebody that was a really big target for this coaching staff. And you look at that and you say, all right, yeah, you lost out to Texas, but you didn't just give up, which is a really great sign for this staff. And, people are going to say whatever they will about, oh, he made a pledge and he went back on it. What does that say? That those are things that honestly, like, I just shrug it off, because it doesn't matter necessarily at the end of the day. What it shows is that this coaching staff, and I feel like, with guys we've had on the show where, Dash Beerley, Devin Hyde, Austin Simmons, whoever you want to say, they talk about this coaching staff. They say, I realize this coaching staff is who really had my best interest at heart. And it feels like that's something that you hear from a lot of these guys. And for somebody like Mills, who he's talked about his family connection to UW and everything like that, this is one of those things where, hey, we know how important this is, not only for this university, but for you and your family. And we want to make sure we can develop you in the best place possible for you. And winning out over Texas is a huge thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's no Zach Paskowski. He didn't flip twice, only flipped once. Like, to me, I don't worry about the guys that, oh, well, he committed to somebody else and he's not. It's like, oh, if it benefits you, who cares? If it benefits somebody else, take note, but it doesn't really matter either way. But yeah, we know Brendan's not going to stop recruiting. We know these guys are not going to stop recruiting. And I think the other side of this equation is, to kind of pair it with the Austin Simmons situation where you flip him from Wazoo, or I guess he decommits the previous week, but whatever, you got to flip him effectively from Wazoo. You're not going down to the Mountain West ranks again, or the G5 ranks again. You're not flipping, some Texas State commit or some, sure, Arizona commit, but God forbid. But I just had to get that in there. But it's a significant take to take him away from Texas. Now, if Texas says, "Hey, we dropped him," whatever, it's like, what? Sure, you did, because you would have dropped him way before signing day. No, exactly, because that's what I'm saying. He would have dropped way before signing day if that was the case. You don't drop a kid 2 days before early signing day. That doesn't happen. So this is a significant take for Washington, not a and like I think it was not Marlon, it was Tula Gasanoa when he flipped from USC, when it was like USC was like, we don't really want him anyways. It's like, okay, but again, either way, you take those victories either way. And again, similar, former California kid.
USC was wrong with that, by the way.
But I mean, also, I think he made the right decision, because who would you rather?
Oh, absolutely.
Peterson, who was down there at that time? Clay Helton?
I think it was still Clay Helton. But yeah, that's a separate discussion. But this is, like, Lars, exactly to your point. When you talk about Thule, we can talk about John Mills, like, obviously, since he's the focus of this podcast. But that's the biggest thing, is this coaching staff. And it's one of the things that moving forward, where we look at the 2026 class and say, hey, it's, other Washington staffs wouldn't have even really tried to go get Braylon Womack out of Mississippi. They wouldn't have tried to push for a Donovan Olugbode, who is from Illinois, but, is going to IMG at Florida. They wouldn't have tried to go get some of these other guys. This staff is. And right away, that's not necessarily something that you look at and you say, oh, well, you didn't get Lenarian Clarity. You didn't get, insert X player here that they offered from Smith Orogbo, Chase Sims, other guys we talked about a little earlier on in the show. You didn't get those guys. So why are you doing it? But it's one of those things where, hey, if they are like, now that you're in the Big Ten, and if you're able to execute your vision, which we've talked about on the show, you're able to execute your vision and move forward and say, all right, yeah, we are a 9-10 win team next season. Hey, that all of a sudden that looks a whole lot better in the Big Ten. But Lars, we got to talk about what else might happen by signing day, which we'll get to right after message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Lars, we've got to talk Donovan Olugbode, where nothing has changed yet, where he's still committed to Missouri. We'll see what that looks like. I know our buddy Scott Eklund has hinted at he might not sign in December. Again, this is a situation we're going to be monitoring. It's very fluid, but looking forward, I just feel better about this one, especially after this John Mills flip, where it's, hey, you were able to sell that with a huge position of need. And whether you agree with it or not, like, this coaching staff clearly feels that it needs more wide receiver, and they want that final piece. And Donovan is it. And it feels like they're really going to start putting on a full court press.
I mean, I think the full court press has been on. It's a matter of when does the game clock hit 0? I think that's actually the question, because to your point about Scott saying that he might not sign in December, I just don't. If it's Washington, Missouri, he signs in December. If it's Washington, Missouri versus Mystery Team X, he's signing with Mystery Team X in February.
Sure.
Because that's how all those situations play out, where it's like, Texas comes in out of nowhere, Alabama comes in out of nowhere,
Sure.
Georgia comes in out of nowhere. And it's like, wait a minute, none of these schools were talked about, I guess the Nico Blendetto thing for football, where it's like, hey, nobody was talking about Washington until he signs with Washington. There's so many situations that arise, but for me, I think it's more of a smokescreen where he's going to sign with Washington tomorrow. I think that would be the safer bet than signing with Washington in February, because I don't see what would be he's already come up for another unofficial visit for the UCLA game.
Yeah.
Been up for an official, has a relationship with somebody in the class directly, and Raiden Vinesbright.
Couple of guys, I think.
Right. No, but I'm just saying the easiest one to point out.
Right.
Would be
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I know it was like an Instagram thing a couple of weeks ago where he was hanging out with Donovan Robinson, since they're both guys that are from Illinois. Like, seems like they grew up somewhat near each other. Like that was an interesting one.
Okay, so that would not even knowing that exists out there in the ether, I would lean more towards like 85% now that he signs tomorrow. And again, that's just opinion. That's not sourced or anything. That's just saying, like, if you read in all the tea leaves, why would you not sign if you're Donovan Olugbode tomorrow? Either way, because if you're going to Missouri and you say, hey, you know what, let me just try and go to Missouri, and if it doesn't work, I'll transfer out next year. Okay, fine. Similar principle at Washington, but I doubt he'll transfer, because you see the McMillan impact in Arizona. You can see what Denzel did in the first year at Washington. Now it's going to be Denzel, Donovan, and then insert a couple of the players left and right that are, Rashid Williams, Audric Harris, work through that list, sure. Keith Reynolds, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't see a scenario in which he's like, hey, you know what, I need more time, because he doesn't strike me as a kid that's like, you know what, let's see who can up the offer a little bit more. Now, remember, it's worth noting, there's, I believe, a 72-hour window or 48-hour window. I think it's 72. Right? So he could sign between Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. We have seen a handful of guys sign on that, Friday date, where right before the end, and it would be after Jedd Fisch's press conference on Wednesday. So Jedd wouldn't be able to talk about it tomorrow, which I just don't see how, if Donovan doesn't sign tomorrow, I don't think he would sign the rest of the week. He doesn't seem like, to me, again, I haven't had a chance to talk to him that much, but He doesn't seem like an attention-seeking kid, like, hey, look at me, I'm going to try and draw this out as long as possible. You know what it reminds me of? Shaq Thompson.
Ooh, interesting.
Back when it was Cal Washington, he was going back and forth. I remember talking to Shaq when I was still in high school. Actually, when we were, I think, not in the same class, but we were relatively in the same class.
That's a
totally different stature difference. So me and him were in the same high school class, but not like any other class connected. Although we're good buddies. But I just remember him being like, he's like, yeah, it was really weighing on me. It was kind of exhausting. And then I talked to my mom about it. And he's like, you know what? I just woke up one day and said, you know what? Screw it. I want to be a Husky.
Yeah.
Signed, and that was it. And so to me, it seems like Donovan has kind of been in that place the last couple of weeks, which is like, Missouri, the SEC, that Washington, Jedd, the NFL, Big Ten. The Big Ten connection, I think, here is really keeping Washington in a lot of these upper conversations. Not that the school itself couldn't, but the kids don't want to play in the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is nice, the FedEx conference, but it's the SEC, it's the Big Ten, then it's a lot of other people down here. And so for me, I can see a scenario in which he wakes up tomorrow and says, you know what? It feels good to be a dog.
Yeah, possible. And Lars, where the best place for all the everydayers out there to make sure that they get the latest news on all that? Right here on Locked On Huskies. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun bonus content coming out like this as more things happen in the transfer portal, the recruiting world. So you got to make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel through content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop it right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.